My favorite way to create a DIY fairy garden is to paint or embellish a wooden bird house. You can easily get these at any craft store. My favorites are Joann's or Michael's. And as you can see, there is quite the variety. There are so many to choose from. And as you see that camper, we're gonna actually feature that later a couple times. I've also used that gazebo as well. And they even have a pirate ship. Now I like to actually cut the string off the top to use, but you could actually just use it with a string and hang it up somewhere. Now you can just paint them and they look absolutely adorable. And then I like to spray them with a coat of polyurethane to help preserve them to be outside. And there's that camper I mentioned earlier. I used it multiple times, so I made different scenes each summer. And by the third summer, the paint was kind of wearing off, so we added some glitter on top there. Now not just painting, but you can embellish them with just about anything. Gems, flowers, old jewelry. The possibilities are endless. I really especially love this one where I took pine cones and separated them to make the roof, and then I've also used the bark for the siding. And of course you have to add glitter for anything fairy. It's also fun to make a themed fairy garden. Here we have a beach theme. We also did an oak theme with using acorns all over the place. You can also use whatever you've decorated your fairy house with to embellish the garden all around it. A rainbow fairy garden is always a fun choice. And as you can see here, we also utilized rainbow popsicle stick fences, which we'll show later in this video. I took dollar store fairies and I painted them each a different color of the colors of the rainbow to sit inside the little houses as well. And there's that gazebo I mentioned earlier. I painted this one rainbow. Another fun thing is to tie on rainbow colored feathers near a tree or a bush or on a branch. This is actually taken from an Easter tradition in Sweden. Fairy garden idea number 2 is to repurpose a teapot or teacup. Now there's a lot of ways you can do it. These teacups were turned on their side and we just put embellishments like Spanish moss, other moss, pine cones, things that weren't alive. But you could also plant real flowers in there as well. This was a broken teacup that was turned upside down to create an adorable little fairy house. I love just taking a teapot and simply putting a fairy door on it. You could also do a little more with the embellishing. The wax candle warmers also make great little fairy houses. Idea number 3 is to paint or decorate upside down clay pots. Now this can be done all sorts of ways. You could do a theme, or here we just have these adorable, whimsical little fairy cottages. Each one with a unique design. And not just paint, but you can also embellish these clay pots. You can use nature items like rocks and moss, or this one's like a beach theme with the pot turned on its side using sea glass, fish netting, and of course seashells. You could also use the very small ones and decorate them with clay. Fairy garden idea number 4, use large pots, an old drawer, or any large container. There are so many fun ways to do this. You can kind of put in just whatever makes you happy. I like to do a little bit of a theme for each pot. Here are my cactus gardens, camping in the desert. We have a sweets theme focusing on red and purple flowers, or a little honeybee theme. And although I may reuse a lot of the same supplies from year to year, I'd like to make them look a little bit different each time. Here we have that acorn house reused as a potted garden. And another fun camping fairy. You could also make some gnome gardens as well. Truly, the possibilities are endless. Fake flower steps can lead you up to the potted garden as well, or you could use shells or stones. And don't forget the glitter! So not only do the large pots make great fairy gardens, you can use an old drawer. You could even stack the doors to make a staggered fairy garden. And I love this idea of using an old wagon. We're almost halfway at idea number 5, so if you really love fairy gardens and fairy garden ideas and anything fairy related, be sure to subscribe to Once Upon a Fairy. Idea number 5 is especially fun if you have young children or grandchildren. Use popsicle sticks to create fairy doors and fairy fences. So you could use the colored popsicle sticks that are already colored, and then we added just those beautiful little gems and some star beads onto these. You can also make your fairy door with those same colored popsicle sticks. And you don't have to stop there, you can even make fairies with popsicle sticks as well. You can also use the theme idea with this. Here we have kind of a beach glass theme. Or this one has stones. I love how the door turned out here. This fairy door used some natural embellishments as well as some wooden beads. Here's another version of our rainbow door, complete with flamingos and a colored sequin walkway. Now you can find tutorials on how to make these fairy doors and fairy fences with popsicle sticks under our Fairy Craft playlist, which I will link at the end of this video. Not just popsicle stick doors, there are many creative ways to make a fairy door on any tree. There's a lot of cool things you can find in nature. This piece of bark was like the perfect size to make a fairy door, so we made a little heart window and a wooden bead doorknob. You could also use clay to make a beautiful fairy door. You can also create a theme for your fairy door garden. Here we have a little fairy library, complete with a book return and little fairy books. These fairies are relaxing against the tree, reading their little fairy stories. And if you had multiple trees in your yard, you could create a whole little fairy village, complete with a post office, church, everything. And I love using seashells in my fairy gardens. Often you can find seashells that are in the perfect shape of a fairy door. And here we've added on those popsicle stick fences with little tiny seashells topping them. Which leads us into idea number 7, a beach fairy garden. So here's that same fairy door with fairy fences, but at this time surrounded with sand and a few extra seashells. You can also use those seashells as a little fairy fence. The blue gems are perfect to create a little pool of water, and flamingos add the perfect touch. You could also use the little blue rocks for fish tanks to make a perfect little river or waterfall. Now this beach fairy garden also has a desert section with cactus gardens. And here my daughter added little walkways so the fairies could all visit each other. No fairy garden is complete without a fairy mailbox. It's fun to write letters back and forth. You can utilize beach stones or seashells to create perfect little fairy entrances. Driftwood is another fun option. It's fun how you can make each little fairy house unique depending on how you place the seashells and stones. You may recognize some of these houses from earlier. They had been outside for quite a few years, like there's our little acorn house from earlier, and they were starting to look pretty sad. So we took them all and spray painted them with pink, green, and blue to create this cute little beach village so they could get one more year out of them. Number 8 is painting rocks. You can paint large rocks for fairy houses and small rocks for fairy garden accessories. You want to look for large rocks that have the similar shape to a house, where you can visualize it, especially if they have a peak at the top. Every year you can use the same fairy houses and fairy garden accessories, yet create a new look, depending how you place them, or what plants you would like to plant with them. This year we decided to elevate them and make a fairy mountain village. Small rocks can be used for a wide variety of fairy garden accessories. You could make little ladybugs or bumblebees. You could also make mushrooms with 2 different rocks. These rocks make the perfect little flower petals. You could also utilize small pebbles to create little walkways between all the fairy houses. DIY idea number 9 is to repurpose jugs and bottles. You can utilize pretty much any bottle, whether it's a plastic bottle or even a glass bottle. Now, the plastic bottles are obviously easier to work with, as you can cut windows and doors. And there's a variety of ways you can decorate them. You can paper mache, paint, glue, use clay, use natural items like bark and stones. Here I created a seashell house for our beach fairy garden. I put heavy rocks inside so it wouldn't blow over. You can also utilize glass jars or containers. I just filled these with gems, beads, and seashells and added on a really cute little coordinating fairy door, of course made out of popsicle sticks. Pretty much any container can be turned into a fairy house, even a gourd. And last but not least is my daughter's very favorite idea, is to use items found in nature. Here are several different fairy homes that she's created all by herself, just finding nature around her. Often after she created these magical fairy gardens, some visiting fairies would appear the next day. The beauty of these natural fairy houses really just speaks for themselves, so we'll just listen to some beautiful music as we watch all of my daughter's amazing creations. Absolutely magical. We hope they add a little magic to your day, but stay tuned to the end, we have a bonus idea. Here in the woods is a magical fairy home. You could tell there are oak fairies that live here, with all the acorns here. So we start off down here at the entrance. Beautiful acorns and moss. Little pine cones, a pretty little pine needle bush. And don't forget, there's a little basket of food for all the visiting fairies. Walk in the ledge. Come into a nice soft moss couch and nibble on some acorns. An adorable forest fairy home. Now these 10 fun DIY ideas are definitely worth the time, but if you just don't have the time to repurpose or to make your own fairy garden accessories, there are so many places where you can purchase fairy garden accessories and even pre-made fairy garden kits. One of my favorite places to buy fairy garden accessories is from Clever Creations by Amy. She's local to Michigan and does many shows in Michigan, but she also has a website, clevercreationsbyamy.com. She's always evolving and creating new things for the fairy gardens, and she likes to do things by holiday and theme as well. These little guys were just bought from the dollar store. So if you're ever in Michigan, Frankenmuth has an adorable little fairy shop called the Enchanted Forest, and it's solely dedicated to fairies and fairy gardens. It's definitely worth the stop. Large fairy figurines are a fun addition to any fairy garden as well, or any garden. And now time for our bonus idea. Turn your fairy garden into a scary garden. Here we have a little pumpkin fairy village, in which we carved little fairy houses out of pumpkins. To see more fun scary garden ideas, click here. That video also features Clever Creations by Amy and many items from her Halloween collection. And here are the popsicle stick tutorials I mentioned earlier. Thank you very much for watching and have a magical day.